بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Today inshallah we're going to shift focus a little bit. We had been talking about previously adala and dhabt. Now what is adala and what is dhabt? So Ibrahim's the only one that's close by, so you get stuck. Unless you guys want to yell the answers from the back, I'm fine with that too. Precision. Oh, dhabt is precision. Ahsant, good. Trustworthiness. So adala is trustworthiness and precision is dhabt. Basically the question then comes is like, who gives anyone the right to determine somebody else's trustworthiness? Is that a valid question or no? Right. What gives you the right to determine how trustworthy this person is or how precise this person is? So why here when we talk about the imams of jarh wa ta'dil, now jarh means criticism, and ta'dil is it's the opposite. What is the opposite of criticizing? Praise. Right. So the scholars are scholars of criticism and praise, and they're not criticizing them for like. Did they criticize them about like being good or bad Muslims? No, right? That wasn't the goal. The goal was to criticize or praise them for what? Right? If these people are eligible narrators or not, right? Are these people capable of carrying forward the statements, actions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That's it. That's what these individuals did. That's what these imams did. Now, how do we determine who an imam is? Right? This is something that's really important. How do we actually determine what an imam is, who an imam is, what gives these individuals a right to do that? And because we said they're not judging a person's Islam, does that shift the conversation a little bit? Because judging a person's Islam, who has a right to do that? I do, like as the imam. No, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, absolutely. So only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that judges the individual's Islam. Over here, if we're judging certain criteria, like for example, a doctor, what does a doctor judge? Right, he judges your health. Can somebody say, oh, like what gives him the qualifications to judge my health, right? You know, there are certain markers that people look for in whatever field it is. Like even if a person comes and he'll tell you like, okay, this is what's wrong with your car. That person is most likely a mechanic. And there are certain skills, there are certain things that he has trained himself to look for in order to judge if this car is roadworthy or not. And it's the same thing with a doctor. There are certain things that he will judge and there are certain things that he will look for to determine if this person is healthy or not. And it's the same thing here. When we talk about jarh wa ta'dil, when we talk about these imams, again, they're not judging an individual's Islam. They're judging whether this person is a reliable or unreliable source or unreliable narrator. And this is something that's really important to keep in mind. And again, jarh wa ta'dil, this is a very important knowledge that studies what? What are we studying? What are we focusing on? What are we talking about? Okay, hadith. What about hadith? Like jarh wa ta'dil is a very specific part of hadith. Narrators, ahsant, right? So the focus of jarh wa ta'dil is a focus on narrators. So jarh wa ta'dil, does that happen today? Can I do jarh wa ta'dil today? No. Yes. 1%. How many narrators are still living? They're all dead. All the narrators are dead. There's no jarh wa ta'dil that can happen. And the reason for that is because all of the people who narrated the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, they're dead. Right? Is there anyone still actively narrating hadith? Like actively? No, I'm not talking about as a science. I'm talking about is jarh wa ta'dil actively being done today? No, it's not. Can I revisit some of the rulings of the previous scholars? Yeah, absolutely. Right. There's always going to be room for that, and there is space for that. And there is actually a number of researches that are done around this, and we'll talk about some of those things. Okay, well, if everybody's dead and we already have all their statements, what are we researching exactly? Right, which is a valid question. Is there room for research in jarh wa ta'dil? The answer is yes. Where is something that we're going to spend a little bit of time discussing, inshallah. So Imam al-Dhahabi, he says here in his Muqiddah, speaking about narrators requires, and he mentions three things. He says the first thing, complete piety. Secondly, an absence of desire and inclination. And thirdly, a detailed knowledge of hadith, their defects, and its men. What do you guys think about these conditions? Reasonable? Unreasonable? At the time? I mean, he's later. Do you guys know when Dhahabi died? He died 748, so he's like much later. He's not actually considered a Naqd, he's considered a Naqil. What is the difference between a Naqid and a Naqil? You guys know? A Naqid is a critic. A Naqil is somebody who relays information. So the most that Imam al-Dhahabi could do is what? Relay rulings of previous scholars. He couldn't actually make a ruling on those individuals' narrators. And the reason, we'll talk about the reasons for that. But he says here that these are the three things, and he's one of the most well-read scholars in Islamic history on Jarh wa Ta'dil and the science of hadith. So if we go back to a lot of his works, a lot of his books, like he has Al-Kashif, he has Al-Mizan, right? He has a number of works. He has Al-Muqtaraḥ here for his, in ulūm al-Hadith. He's written a number of works on this specifically, like on narrators. He has a agreement with Imam Hakim's Mustadrak. So Imam Hakim, he wrote this collection. He has this collection of a hadith, and there are hadith that Imam al-Dhahabi, he would either agree with him or he would disagree with his rulings on. So he was a very famous hadith scholar, very very well balanced, huh? Yeah, I'm here. The information is established, right? You know, in even here by this time the science is pretty well established. It's pretty well settled. I'm sorry. He expanded, right? He expanded. There's like a lot of works. Do you guys know his most famous work? I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called Sir A'lam Nubala. So basically, it's like one of the longest biographical works that have been done in Islamic history. He has two. One is Tarikh al-Islam, which is significantly longer, but he has shorter biographies of the entries in there. Sir A'lam, he actually goes into more detailed discussions. So you'll find from the time of the Sahaba, all of the major figures of Islam up until his time. Up until his time, he had written, it's like, I think it's like 50 volumes or something. His Tarikh al-Islam is much longer. Yeah, it's 748, man. It's like you're talking about 748. We're in 1444 now, so you're talking 700 years ago exactly. What was going on 700 years ago? In the 12, what was it? No, 1300s. So anyway, this to give you a time frame of what was going on, what was happening at the time. So this Imam al-Dhahabi, he said after his reading and after his collection of these things, I'm sorry, can you close that door, please? After his reading and after his discussion, he came to this conclusion. He's like, these are the things that I see in these scholars. I see complete piety, I see an absence of desire and inclination, and I see a detailed knowledge of hadith, their defects, and its men. This is his personal summary of what he saw in the scholars in the imams of Jarh wa Ta'dil. So here, how do we know this is the case? How do we know that these individuals actually had this piety? How do we know that these individuals actually didn't have this inclination? How do we know that these individuals had this detailed knowledge? And we can say that this happens in two ways, right? There are two ways to figure this out. There are two ways to determine that these individuals actually were who they claim to be. One way is through the books that this person authored in the science. So if an individual writes a book on something, writing a book, and that's something that even in modern times, what happens when you write a book? Right, you publish it for sure, right? You publish it. People in the same field now, they're going to go and what? They're going to go read it, and they're going to go look at it. And then they're going to say what? Right, they're going to say the book is good or not. Even Imam Bukhari, what did we say? That like one of the reasons that it took such a high standing was because what? Right, the other contemporaries, other imams, they're like, man, this is an amazing work. And the moment when you have recognition from people in the field, then that brings up the value of that work or of that book. How many books do we know that are published every single year? Right, there's like millions, like literally. There's like millions of books that are published every year. How many of them actually receive recognition? Very few. Why? Well, marketing can be part of it, for sure. And another part of it can be like, well, the person who wrote about it wasn't considered qualified in that particular field, right? So people, what happens automatically if I hear that a mechanic is writing about, how the heart functions, right? Am I going to even bother opening the book? No, most likely I won't. Does it mean that he's wrong? No, not necessarily, but because I don't know this person to be in that field, I'm probably going to dismiss that work and I'm going to dismiss that book. So over here, Imam al-Dhahabi, he himself is considered somebody who is qualified in this field. His biggest sheikh was there. He had two big sheikhs. I don't know if you guys know them. One very controversial, one less controversial. Shaykh al-Islam, Ahmed ibn Taymiyyah. That was one of his mashayikh. That was one of his teachers. His second one, less controversial, Imam al-Mizzi. Imam al-Mizzi, he's very famous for because he wrote a book called Tahdhib al-Kamal. Tahdhib al-Kamal, basically what he did is he took all of the major works of hadith that we know today. Before him, there weren't 6, by the way. Before them, there were 5. Some of them made 7. Some of them made 6. They excluded Ibn Majah and they put Sunan al-Darimi in its place. So there was a lot of flux in how you decided which were the considered major hadith works in Islam. It was because of Imam Mizzi, Imam al-Dhahabi Sheikh, who the reason that we use these 6 books today. And those 6 books are that we went over their biographies very quickly. Bukhari, Muslim, Imam Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, An-Nasa'i, but before him there's one. But it's okay. We'll put the last one on the end. What is the last one? Ibn Majah. So these 6 books, what Imam al-Mizzi did, and this was again Imam al-Dhahabi Sheikh, he said, okay, I'm going to take all of the narrators from these books and I'm going to list them alphabetically. And I'm going to put where they're narrating. So I'm going to mention the places where they narrate, and I'm going to mention a short biography about them, and I'm going to mention what the scholars of Jarh wa Ta'dil had to say about them. So this was a very, very fundamental book, right? It's a very important book that was done because he categorized and he organized a lot of these. It's very easy. If I want to find out about any narrator, if I'm reading Sunan Nasa'i or if I'm reading Sunan Ibn Majah and I find a narrator, what is one of the books I can go back to? I can go back to Tahdhib al-Kamal, right? I can go back to Imam al-Mizzi's book and I can find out about this narrator. I can find out what other books he narrated in. I can find out a short biography of him. I can find out what the scholars said about this narrator, and it'll help me reach a ruling on that particular hadith. So one is through the books that this individual authored. What is the second way that I could find out about someone? What if he doesn't have any works and he hasn't written anything? It's not that he hasn't done anything. He doesn't have a published work. How else can I find out about this person, about this imam? Through what others have written about him, right? So either what he himself wrote or what others have written about him, right? These are the only 2 ways that I can find out about someone. And this helps me determine about that individual, what his position was and what his status was. So going into his works, these are some very famous works, right? These are some very famous works. Over here, I've mentioned 3, right? These are 3 very famous works that were done by different scholars, by different imams. The first of them is Jarh wa Ta'dil by Ibn Abi Hatim. Ibn Abi Hatim, his father was a great scholar of Jarh wa Ta'dil, and you will find throughout this book, he says, Sa'altu Abi. He said that I asked my father. And what he did, there's a series of questions that he does. He asks his father about these different narrators, and whatever his father would respond, he would note it down. Sometimes he would disagree, right? So sometimes he wouldn't agree with the ruling that his father gave, and sometimes he would disagree with that, or he would add additional information to that. There are 2 works. So over here he says that he'll only mention statements of those who are relied upon in Jarh wa Ta'dil. So a lot of people might speak about a narrator. Yes. So you have, even today, you have very controversial figures, right? So even if we look at the major speakers, like we have like Yasir Qadi and Omar Suleiman and Zayd Shakir and Hamza Yusuf, all of these people, do you have people who speak about them in positive ways? Yes. Do you have a lot of people who speak about them negatively? Yes, you do. Do all of them have weight? Do all of them have value? No. Why? He might not be qualified, right? So even the thing is like, I don't want to say, I'm not using the word right in the way that like everybody is, if you're in the public sphere, I'm trying to word this in a good way. If I'm in the public sphere, then people will what? criticize, right? Like if you're in a public setting, people will criticize. This is well known. Huh? Troll some of them. That's me. I troll them. So like you do have people who will criticize. Now, how do I know if that criticism carries weight if it's coming from someone who what? Right, who's qualified, right? Someone who's in the same field, someone who's in the same standing. Because if I have like, Khalid, a rando, you know what I mean? Like just a random person, and he says like, oh, Zaid Shakir, XYZ, and he just talks about him, and he says all these things. There's no value to that. But if I have other people who are just as qualified, who are saying things, and they might be valid criticisms, then those things are to be taken. And it's the same thing here. He says that, okay, yeah, there are a lot of people who talk in this field. There are a lot of people who talk, but I'm only going to rely on people who are actually qualified. And this is something that's really important. And then here, there's a secondary work. So this was actually done by one of my sheikh's students. He taught me when I was in Kulliyah, Hisham Halaf. He said, Al-Muzakkun li rawat al-akhbar inda Ibn Abi Hatim. So basically what he did is he took all of the imams of Jarh wa Ta'dil that Ibn Abi Hatim narrates, he took them out and he alphabetized them. So he did, it's a small work. It's like, I think it's like 27 pages or something like that. Hisham Halaf. He's short. He's a small guy. Possible, yeah. He's, mashallah, very intelligent, very short. Like he's actually really sharp. But he what he did is he took out all of the imams and he said, okay, these individuals, according to Ibn Abi Hatim, are qualified to speak about narrators, and he put them in alphabetical order. Here, Imam al-Dhahabi, he has a work, it's called ذكر من يعتمد قوله في جرح وتعديل. This is again by Imam al-Dhahabi, the one that we had mentioned previously. And he does the same thing, right? So he gathers all of the different imams who he feels are qualified to speak on narrators. And the last one we have here, al-Mutakallimun fi al-Rijal, by Imam al-Sakhawi. He's a much later scholar, right? So he comes much later. He's a little bit after Ibn Hajar, but he's probably one of the last great hadith scholars from the earlier generations. So he died like 500 years ago. And then from others, what do I do? Then I would look into biographical works. I have to go and look into other biographical works. And I have to see what those biographical works actually say. And that would give me information about this individual, about this imam, about this person. It would tell me about his memory, his status as an imam, what other imams had to say about him. Because for those of you that come to the Muslim class, what is one of the things that Imam Muslim does in order to help determine the position of someone on how trustworthy he was or how his memory was? What is one tool that he used? I don't know if you guys remember. Did he put him like, he said, oh, this is like level 7 and this guy's like level 4. Did he do that? How did he judge an individual? How did he judge a narrator? He would compare them. So he would say, so-and-so is not like so-and-so in terms of health. Right, because that's all you could do, right? You have to compare two people. You would compare two individuals in order to get their status. Like an example of this, and be like, okay, well, Omar Sulaiman is knowledgeable, but he's not as knowledgeable as Yasir Qadi, for example, right? So, does this diminish anyone's knowledge? No. It says that they're both knowledgeable, but can you put them on the same level? No, you can't. And this is, again, I'm giving modern examples to help understand, past pretext is that this is how that they would actually gauge people. That there are certain people who are known to be knowledgeable, but there are people who are also knowledgeable, but they weren't on the same level. So how many imams need to speak about an individual? So if I have a narrator, and how many imams need to speak about this narrator before I accept or reject him? Huh? Well, the more the better is a good statement, but how many? But here we're talking about need. What's the minimum? What do you think? Yes, there is. 2? Anyone else? 1 or no? None? No. None. It would just be unfair, right? Like everybody's written off. We would have no hadith. 1. Yeah. Got it? MashaAllah. How many imams do you need to speak? You just need 1. Obviously, this is So if this person is ahl, right, if he has all the academic tools and he has the integrity to do so, then his statement is accepted. Right? All I need is one imam. Just one imam is enough to comment on an individual for me to accept or to reject his narrations. The types of jarh wa ta'deel. There are two. There's detailed, and there is what? What is the opposite of detailed? Vague. Right? Vague is good, actually. Vague actually might have been worked better. So general or vague. What do you think the what do you think the difference is? One is one is general, and one is detailed. Excellent. Very good. You got it. You hit the nail on the head. So if you have the one who is praising or criticizing, if they give the reason, right? So that's what detailed means. If they're giving the reasoning of why they made the ruling on this individual, it is considered a jarh wa ta'deel mufassar, right? So this is something that is clarified, something that is clear. And if you don't, this is something that is called mubham, right? It's something that is general or vague. And this is basically, someone will say that, he's thiqa, or he's excellent, or he's kadhab, and that's it. You don't have any other information. Can you wake up, Fahmi, man? He's like totally out, man. Fahmi. Come on, man. Are you're dreaming about he's dreaming about the imams of jarh wa ta'deel. So he's absorbing in his sleep. So when the one praising or criticizing does not clarify the reason for the ruling. Tayyib. I guess the next question would be, does every praise or criticism need to be clarified? Do you think this is a condition? Okay, no, I have a no. Anyone say yes? So as far as praise is concerned, do I need a reason to praise someone? Or here, let me put it this way. How many reasons do I have to praise someone? Just like one or two, or is there many? Right, there are many reasons I can praise someone, right? Like they're generous, or they're modest, or they're trustworthy, or they're very frank, or they're very courageous. There's like thousands of reasons that we can use to praise someone. When it comes to dispraising someone, are they just as many? No, think about it. It's actually very few, if you think about it. Right? The person isn't either he's a liar, or he's not trustworthy. Yes? So the reasons to actually criticize someone remember, we're talking about in the science. We're not talking about in general. But as far as the science is concerned, if you look, the reasons to actually criticize someone are very few. They're very limited. Yeah, that's enough to reject his hadith. So forget anything else that he does. And even the other things that we can think of, they'll fall under one of these two. All right, he committed zina. He's not trustworthy, right? Right? He steals. Well, he's not trustworthy. You understand? So even these other things that we can think of, like the other reasons that we would have to actually dispraise someone or to criticize someone, you'll find that it'll fall under one of these two larger categories. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, when it comes, basically he's saying that this person is as objective as possible. That's all. Because the reality is there anyone who's completely free of desire? And he's talking about as someone who is objective within the confines of the science. Imam al-Nasa'i, what did we say about him? I know all of you remember this. I don't know why. What did we say about Imam al-Nasa'i? He had 4 wives, and he used to eat a chicken every single day. Right, he loved chicken, man. He loved his chicken. Chicken was available, man. Actually, rice, I think, was introduced during the time of the Tabi'een. It was relatively early. No, not these things. Rice is not known to the Arabs, right? It's not an Arab thing. It's an Asian thing. It was classically bread, bread, wheat, flour. These things were these are very Arab dishes, cuisines. Rice is something that came later. But I think it came relatively early. Chicken was there. So like we said, that a general praise is reason enough. So if, for example, you have scholars who say, and he's thiqa, right? His hadith are accepted. That's it. You don't need to question any further on why his, why do we accept his hadith? No, there's no reason to actually explore that. So as for criticism, then the reasons for a person being criticized, we actually said are very specific, right? There are very specific reasons for a person to be criticized. but is the reason needed? So if I have a scholar that says matruk al-hadith, his hadith are abandoned, does he have to give me the reason of why his hadith are abandoned? How are we giving this person a chance? Well, what reason is our hadith been abandoned? Yeah, so a 1-star review with no comment. Well, a 5-star review with more comment, I would trust more, right? But the 1-star review with no comment, I'd be like, okay, but why? Right? There's no parking. I agree. I agree 100%. But I'm saying even then, both general praise and criticism are accepted when this applies when there's no difference of opinion. Meaning that if there is a narrator and there is a difference of opinion regarding that narrator, then I need what? I need a specific reason. Right? It's not enough. Why? Why? Because it's possible that there are other factors that caused that imam to make jar or to criticize that particular narrator. But if there's no difference of opinion, then it's okay. Then if an imam says matruk al-hadith and everybody says that this person is abandoned, then what do? I abandon his hadith. It's like getting like 20 1-star reviews. Right? At that point, I might want to be like, Sure. I mean, there could be personal reasons like that, but I mean, we assume that those aren't reasons for criticism, right? Like that, ideally. Now, within the field, obviously you do have professional jealousy. There's no doubt about that. But I'm saying that, okay, assuming, like, we should assume best that, okay, these people who are criticizing, they're not doing it for those reasons. And that would where that would be apparent? Is it possible that everybody's jealous? No. It's not possible that every single person is jealous. Right. Usually jealousy is just going to be like, there's going to be one or two people that are jealous. And where's that guy going to show up? Because you're going to be like, okay, well, what is these 20 other guys? They're saying that he's accepted and he's okay. What is the problem with these two here? Then you'll read into what? Then you'll read like, oh, and then he interacted with him here. Oh, he took away his students. You know what I mean? Like you actually have these things that happened, and then you start saying like, okay, I see what happened here. He's just salty. No, you can see it. You'll be like, oh yeah, he's just salty. I could see why he's so upset here. And we had used the example in Imam Muslim's class, right? So you have Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, very famous example, somebody who was clearly intimidated and jealous of Imam al-Bukhari. I mean, can't really blame the guy. Huh? Oh, jealousy? Yeah, no, jealousy is a real thing. I mean, the thing is, it requires a lot of tazkiyah, right? It requires a lot of like mujahada and like fighting your nafs, but jealousy is a real thing, man. True. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. If there is khilaf, what are the steps? What do we do then? If I have a narrator and there's khilaf over this narrator, how do I actually engage now? What do I do? And there are steps for this too. This differing over a narrator is something that we call ta'arud. And ta'arud al-jarh wa ta'dil. This is when there's not an agreement between the jarh wa ta'dil. So you have a narrator and there have scholars who are criticizing him and there are scholars who are praising him. What do we do? Can we just abandon the hadith? No, or that's not being fair either. So we have to look and we have to take the steps. So how does this occur? Sometimes you have one imam making conflicting statements. So we talked a little bit about some of the reasons that could happen, but why would you have one imam that has conflicting statements? What could have happened in that situation? Okay, an old opinion and a new one. Maybe he came across more information. That's a possibility. What else? He was mistaken. Maybe he made a mistaken ruling and then he corrected it. What else? Is it possible the narrator changed? Yeah. We had talked about this group of people. You guys remember? Al-Muḥaddithīn. That an individual, something happened, a trauma happened, and what happened? right? The narrator himself changed. So the ruling from the imam, that changed. Conflicting statements from one imam. So I'm sorry, the first one was different. This one was one. I reversed the order. But if you have different imams, right? So you have some scholars that say he is accepted, and you have some scholars that say he is rejected. I think that's something that's really clear. And one of the most challenging sections of this science, in Jarh wa Ta'deel itself, is that the one who doesn't specialize in it, he's going to be like, yo, what is going on? It's like, this guy's saying he's abandoned, this guy's saying he's like an amazing, like how did that happen? And it looks, again, and we had talked about this, I think, initially, when an outsider comes and just kind of looks at the science, to him it's just going to appear random. It's like, man, all right, he's saying this is accepted and this is rejected and this is okay and this is all right, right? Right, it looks random. It doesn't look like there's any method that's going on here. And this is the same problem with Jarh wa Ta'deel. Like, all of a sudden it's like, an fulan. Like, I asked about fulan and he told me this. And he said, if he narrates on these people, he's okay. And if he narrates on these people, he's not. And I asked him about this. And you're just going through and there's just like all these questions. Just asking about different narrators. So for someone as an observer, he's going to be like, yo, what is going on? Like, what is going on here? It's just like a bunch of questions. This looks so random. How do I know that he's even giving the right ruling on this person? Yeah, no, you have to, like, so you do need to have knowledge. When I'm engaging with these books and I see a narrator being spoken about, there are a few things I need to know. Number one, I need to know about the narrator being asked about. And secondly, I need to know about his narrations. Right, so it's not enough for me to know like where he was, when he was born, who his teachers and stuff were. I need to actually know what his narrations were. Because when he's asked about that, it'll be like, okay, well, what do you say about Ahmed narrating on Khalid, for example? So I'll have to know what? All of the chains where Ahmed and Khalid are mentioned together. And this is why it's such an intricate science, and that's why it looks, and that's why it comes across as so challenging sometimes. So over here, what are some important books? I've listed 3 books here. You have Al-Kamil by Ibn Adi. This is probably one of the most earliest works, and this is called Al-Kamil fi al-Du'afa. And basically this is a collection of weak narrators. And not necessarily weak. There are a number of narrators that there's actually a difference of opinion over that he mentions and he brings. And then you have Al-Mizan, and then you have, the full name is called Mizan al-I'tidal, which is basically the scales of justice. And what Imam al-Dhahabi does in that work is he brings all of the different narrators and he'll talk about the jarh and he'll do the ta'deel also. So he'll say all of these scholars praise him and all of these scholars criticize him, and this is these are some of the statements that they have. And last one, Lisan al-Mizan. Lisan al-Mizan was the latest work that was done. This was done in 852, and Lisan al-Mizan is basically, so a scale has, like, this balance point. You guys know what that's called? It's called the tongue. Yeah, this is called the tongue. So Lisan al-Mizan means the tongue of the scales. So he's trying to say that I'm producing a work that is more what? A little bit more precise than the one that preceded me. And then my Shaykh Hatim al-Awni, he actually has a work that's called Dhayl Lisan, which is basically, in addition, he's saying these are the narrators that Ibn Hajar he missed and that he's included in a separate work. So when there's a difference of opinion of a narrator, what do I do? And there are a number of steps that are involved. There are 3 major steps that are very important to keep in mind and very important to follow. The first one, determine if the difference of opinion is actual. Right? Is there a real difference of opinion concerning this person, or is it a perceived one? Because if it's a perceived one, that means that there's no real difference of opinion. Secondly, making an informed decision, meaning that after I have all this information, what am I going to do? Either I'm going to say he is accepted or rejected. And lastly, suspension. Suspension means that I don't have enough information to what? To make a ruling. Like, I can't decide either way. So these are the 3 steps that I do. Number 1, I have to establish if there's a difference of opinion. Secondly, once I determine what that difference of opinion is, I need to make a choice. And thirdly, if I don't have enough information to make a choice, then I suspend a ruling, and I don't make a ruling until I have more information to make that ruling. And there's nothing wrong with that. So if we have a difference of opinion over a narrator, is it actual? Or is it something that we can decide over, or do we need to suspend over that? And again, is there an actual difference of opinion over the narrator, or is it something that's perceived? we weigh the opinions, and then we'll make that decision. And finally, when there's no way to reconcile in a meaningful way, then we would suspend judgment. So even in determining the first step, how do I determine if there's an actual difference of opinion? And there are different ways of doing this. Number one, ascription. Is the ascription sound? So these scholars who made these statements, are those asanid, can I actually ascribe them to them? Did Imam al-Nasa'i actually say this? Did Yahya ibn Ma'in actually say this? Did Imam Bukhari actually say this? And if I can determine the ascription, if I can say like, no, this chain, and subhanAllah, even in Jarh wa Ta'dil, we have chains of narration. So when it comes to carrying forward these statements, we actually have chains of narrations for those as well. So not only is it important to understand that there are asanid for hadith, there are also asanid for Jarh wa Ta'dil. Yes. Yeah. And it was narrated on so-and-so that he said such and such. I mean, you need it, right? Is it reconcilable? So once I ascribe it and once I determine, like, yes, all of these imams said what it is that they actually said, then is their position reconcilable? Is it possible that I look at all of these statements and I determine, well, actually, it's important to understand that when he said, if you have 5 scholars that say he's accepted and you have 3 that say he is rejected, it's like, okay, well, this looks like I can't reconcile it, but yes. Sure. So the weight of the scholar is something that's really important. If I have 5 mid-tier scholars say that he's good, and I have 3 high-caliber scholars that say he's rejected, what do? I would take the high-caliber scholars. The other one is like, okay, these 5 scholars, when did they meet him? Right? Did they meet him early in his hadith career? And these 3, did they meet him later? You know what I mean? Like, so there's a lot of investigation that can actually happen concerning these narratives. And lastly, if it's irreconcilable. Right, so in that situation, if I have, for example, if I have 5 for and 3 against, these 5 I found out that they met him before there was a fire, and these 3 they met him after his books burned. Did I reconcile it? Yes, I did. Right, I determined, said, but all of them are what? Right. All of them are right. But if I have an irreconcilable position, saying, okay, well, these 5 who are pro and these 3 are against, there's nothing like that. Somebody has to be right. Right, somebody has to be right. How do I determine that? And again, that requires its own steps. And sometimes the scholar can be unjust in his ruling. Sometimes he heard something from someone else and he trusted that person, and what did he do? He made a ruling based on what he had heard or what he had experienced. So we're just going to talk about this first one today, inshallah. So this is checking the ascription. So number one, the scholar himself. This person who is making the statement, is he from that list of accepted scholars or not? This is very important. It can't just be a rando, right? It can't be like just random person who's making the statement. The chain. Is this chain of narration concerning the statement about this individual, can it be verified or not? Is how the statement was relayed a mistake? So in that chain, did somebody make a mistake when they relayed it? Or was the imam himself mistaken? When he made the ruling, is it possible that he made that mistake? If he dispraised that person for an unacceptable reason, then that statement would be rejected. Another reason, misunderstood. The statement of the imam was misunderstood. I'll give a very common example. Yahya ibn Ma'in, he said about someone he said, huwa shaitan. What do you guys think that means? He is a shaitan. Do you think that he's praising him or dispraising him? Huh? I'm saying superficially, what does it look like? It's dispraise, right? This looks like a criticism. He wasn't. He was actually praising him. He's saying, this guy is so intelligent, he's got to be a shaitan. Yeah. Huh? Yeah. No. Like he's insanely intelligent, right? So that's the same thing. He's a shaitan. He's not saying it because he actually thinks he's evil. He's like, yo, this guy is like, he's insanely intelligent. But someone who comes and reads it, what are they going to be like? They're like, oh, this narrator is what? Oh, he's rejected. He's a shaitan. Misascribed. So sometimes if you have imams sharing names, what's going to happen? You're going to think that this imam said it when in actuality it was someone else who had made that statement. Misapplied. Sometimes the mistake isn't in the imam, it's in the person who he is talking about. So sometimes there's a misapplication that's there that's important to keep in mind. And lastly, the timeline. There's a difference between an early critic and a later critic, and we had talked about this. So someone who lived in the era of active narration, their statements are going to be much, much, much heavier than someone who's relaying those statements down the road. And this is something that's important. If I go back to the classical scholars, if I go back to Abu Hatim and Ibn Abi Hatim, Yahya ibn Ma'in, Sufyan al-Thawri, Ibn Uyayna, all of these major, Imam Zuhri, Imam Bukhari, right? If I go back to all of these major scholars, then if they speak about a narrator, what do? I trust it. But if somebody later comes and says something, I have to what? Then I have to research and I have to investigate. And Allah knows best, but we'll stop here inshallah. Next time inshallah we'll talk about how to deal, like what are different ways that we can actually reconcile some of these statements, and Allah knows best. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Inshallah we'll continue with the tazkiyah class in about 10 minutes.